In 1945, a four-star general sat down and wrote a letter about a rifle. He could have written about tanks, since he commanded more of them than almost anyone alive. He could have written about the atomic bomb that had just ended the war in the Pacific. But George Patton, the man who had led armored divisions across North Africa and Europe, who had chased Rommel through the desert and raced the Soviets to Berlin, picked up a pen and praised a weapon that weighed less than 10 pounds and fit in the hands of a single infantryman. He called the M1 rifle the greatest battle implement ever devised. What nobody knew at the time was that the man who created it, a quiet Canadian immigrant working out of a government workshop in Massachusetts, would never receive a single dollar in royalties for his invention. Over 6 million of his rifles were built. They armed every branch of the American military. They stormed the beaches at Normandy and fought through the jungles of Guadalcanal. And John Garand, the man who made all of it possible, went home every night on a civil servant's salary. This is the story of that rifle and the man behind it. It was 1888, and on a small farm just outside Montreal in the town of Saint-Rémy, Quebec, a boy named John Garand was born into a family of 12 children, 6 boys, 6 girls. Every one of the boys shared the same official first name, Saint-Jean le Baptiste, but only Jean went by John. The rest used their middle names. The Garand family was not wealthy. They worked the land, and when their mother died in 1899, their father packed up the children and moved them across the border to Jewett City, Connecticut. John was 11 years old. He did not speak English. He got a job sweeping floors in a textile mill, and that is where he learned the language, word by word, broom in hand. But the mill taught him something else too. He watched the machines run. He studied how the gears turned, how the bobbins spun, how metal parts moved in sequence to accomplish a task. By the time he was a teenager, John Garand understood machinery the way some kids understand sports or music. It just made sense to him. And by the age of 18, he had already patented 2 inventions of his own, a telescopic screw jack and an automatic bobbin winding machine. He moved on to a tool-making company in Providence, Rhode Island, where he learned precision machining. He spent time in New York City, where he practiced shooting at Broadway galleries after work. And somewhere in those years, firearms stopped being a hobby and started becoming an obsession. Garand was not interested in pulling a trigger for fun. He wanted to understand what happened inside the mechanism after the trigger was pulled. He wanted to make it work better, faster, more reliably. Then the First World War broke out, and everything changed. In 1917, the United States Army put out a call for a new light machine gun design. Garand, now 29 years old, submitted his own concept. The War Department liked what they saw enough to bring him to the Bureau of Standards in Washington. His machine gun prototype was not produced until 1919, a year after the war ended, so it never saw combat. But Garand had caught the attention of the right people. A year later, he walked through the gates of the Springfield Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts, as a government employee, and the assignment waiting for him would consume the next 17 years of his life. The Army wanted a new infantry rifle. Specifically, they wanted a semi-automatic one. At the time, the standard issue weapon for American troops was the M1903 Springfield, a bolt-action rifle that required the shooter to manually cycle the bolt after every single shot. Pull the trigger, lift the bolt handle, pull it back, push it forward, lock it down, then fire again. A trained soldier could fire maybe 15 rounds per minute this way. Competent, sure, but the experience of the First World War had made one thing absolutely clear. Infantry combat was getting faster, more lethal, and more chaotic. Machine guns had already transformed the battlefield. The Army knew that semi-automatic fire, where the rifle reloads itself using gas pressure from the fired cartridge, would double or even triple the individual soldier's rate of fire. The concept was simple in theory. When a round is fired, some of the expanding gas that pushes the bullet down the barrel is bled off through a small port and used to drive a piston, which cycles the bolt rearward, ejects the spent cartridge, and strips a fresh round from the clip into the chamber. All of this happens in a fraction of a second, automatically. The question was whether anyone could design a semi-automatic rifle that performed this gas-operated cycle reliably enough, in a package light enough for a single soldier to carry, and simple enough for factories to build by the million. John Garand set out to answer that question, and the answer took him through failure after failure over nearly 2 decades. His first serious design used a primer-actuated system, where the tiny movement of the cartridge primer would unlock the bolt. The engineering was clever, the concept was sound, but it required specially manufactured ammunition with a primer designed to move a specific distance, and the army was not interested in retooling its entire supply chain for one rifle. Garand went back to the drawing board. He experimented with different bolt designs, testing rotating bolts against pivoting bolts that locked at the rear. He tried different gas systems. He went through a series of prototypes that the Army designated with increasingly long alphanumeric names: the T1, the T1E1, the T1E2, each one a refinement of the last. He was not working alone in this race either. Other designers were competing for the same contract. The Johnson rifle and a Winchester design both went through Army trials alongside Garand's prototypes. The evaluation process was rigorous, sometimes brutal. Rifles were fired thousands of rounds in dust, mud, rain, and freezing temperatures. They were dropped, submerged, and deliberately abused to find their breaking point. Garand's design kept surviving where others did not. But there was a political complication. The Army originally wanted a smaller caliber, the .276 Pedersen round, and Garand built prototypes around it. Then, in 1932, the Chief of Staff, General Douglas MacArthur, intervened. MacArthur insisted the new rifle use the existing .30 caliber ammunition that the military already had in massive stockpiles. So Garand redesigned the entire weapon. Again, this decision seemed small at the time. It was not. By switching back to the .30-06 Springfield cartridge, Garand ensured that the rifle could use the same ammunition already in warehouses across the country. That compatibility would prove critical when the time came to arm millions of soldiers in a hurry. But, in the short term, it meant more years of testing, more redesigns, more frustration. The rifle went through field trials in 1934. 50 went to infantry units, 25 to cavalry. Problems surfaced, modifications followed, more trials, more fixes. Finally, on January 9, 1936, the weapon was officially standardized as the United States Semi-Automatic Rifle, Caliber 30, M1. After 17 years of work, John Garand had his rifle. But getting it into the hands of soldiers was another challenge entirely. Production at Springfield Armory started painfully slow. The first production rifles were not delivered to the Army until September of 1937. The Armory was building just 10 rifles a day. 10. For an army that would eventually need millions. Each M1 receiver had to be forged from hot steel, hammered into shape by massive dies that wore out quickly and needed constant replacement. The barrels had to be precisely rifled. The stocks were carved from walnut and then milled out to clear the barrel and action. Every one of these steps required specialized machinery, and, in the beginning, Springfield simply did not have enough of it. By 1939, as Hitler invaded Poland and the world lurched toward another global war, Springfield had only managed to scale up to 100 per day. That number was not even close to what would be needed. And Garand himself was part of the solution. He designed new manufacturing tools, including a 3-spindle, 10-station vertical profiling machine that could cut and shape parts faster and more accurately than anything the Armory had used before. He was not just an inventor of weapons. He was an inventor of the machines that built the weapons. For a while, things actually seemed fine. The war was in Europe. The United States was not involved. There was time. That did not last. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and the United States was at war. Suddenly, the M1 Garand was not just a promising new weapon. It was the rifle that every American soldier, Marine, and sailor would carry into combat. Production had to explode overnight. By January of 1942, Springfield Armory was producing 600 rifles per day. Winchester Repeating Arms received contracts to build even more, and at its peak, Springfield was turning out 4,000 M1 Garands every single day. The cost per rifle dropped from $200 at the start of production all the way down to $26 by 1945. In total, over 5.4 million M1 Garands were manufactured during the Second World War, and the rifle was about to prove itself on battlefields across two hemispheres. Here is what made the M1 Garand different from every other standard infantry rifle in the war. It was semi-automatic. The shooter pulled the trigger, the rifle fired, and the gas system automatically ejected the spent cartridge and loaded the next round into the chamber. The bolt cycled itself. The next round was already waiting. A trained soldier with an M1 could fire 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute without ever taking his cheek off the stock or his eyes off the sights. Now think about what the enemy was carrying. German infantry used the Carabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle. Japanese soldiers carried the Arisaka Type 99, also bolt-action. Italian troops had the Carcano, bolt-action again. Every single one of those weapons required the shooter to manually work the bolt after each shot. That meant a German soldier firing his Mauser was putting out maybe 10 to 15 rounds per minute. An American soldier with a Garand was firing 3 to 4 times faster, with both hands on the weapon and his eyes on the target the entire time. That is not a small edge. That is a completely different kind of fight. Imagine a squad of 8 American infantrymen advancing on a position held by an equal number of German troops, armed with Mauser bolt-action rifles. The Americans are putting out roughly 350 aimed rounds per minute combined. The Germans, cycling their bolt-actions as fast as humanly possible, are managing maybe 100. The math is brutal. And it is not just about volume. With a bolt-action rifle, the shooter has to break his cheek weld, lift his head, work the bolt with his firing hand, then resettle back onto the target. Those few seconds of disruption between each shot mean lost aim, lost time, and lost awareness of the battlefield. The M1 shooter just keeps pulling the trigger. His sight picture stays steady. His focus stays on the enemy. That difference in continuity is just as important as the difference in rate of fire. And it played out exactly like that across every theater of the war. In North Africa, the M1 gave American troops fighting Rommel's Afrika Korps a decisive close-range advantage during engagements in the desert. In Italy, soldiers carried the Garand through the brutal mountain fighting along the Gustav Line, where rapid follow-up shots mattered in the tight terrain around Monte Cassino. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, American soldiers wading through the surf at Omaha Beach and Utah Beach climbed those bluffs with M1 Garands in their hands. The rifle worked even after being submerged in salt water, caked with sand, and dropped in the chaos of the landing. It kept firing. In the Pacific Theater, the advantage was even more stark. Japanese infantry doctrine relied heavily on aggressive bayonet charges, the Banzai attack, designed to overwhelm defenders through sheer speed and ferocity. These charges had been devastatingly effective against Chinese troops armed with bolt-action rifles, who simply could not fire fast enough to stop a wave of attackers closing the distance at a dead sprint. But against American Marines armed with M1 Garands at Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, those same charges ran straight into a wall of semi-automatic fire. The results were catastrophic for the attackers. A squad of Marines could pour so many rounds downrange so quickly that even large Banzai assaults would collapse before reaching the American lines. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. The very feature that made the M1 Garand so effective in combat also created one of the most persistent myths in military history. The rifle used an 8-round en-bloc clip. This was a simple piece of stamped spring steel that held 8 rounds of .30-06 Springfield ammunition in a double-stacked arrangement. The soldier pushed the loaded clip down into the top of the open action with his thumb, and the bolt snapped forward, chambering the first round. From there, Each pull of the trigger fired a round and automatically loaded the next. When the soldier fired the eighth and final round, the clip was automatically ejected upward out of the top of the rifle by the follower spring. And as that empty piece of spring steel flew out and bounced off the inside of the receiver, it made a distinctive, sharp, metallic sound, a ping. High-pitched, brief, unmistakable. It is probably the most recognizable sound in the history of infantry weapons. If you have ever played a World War II video game or watched a movie like Saving Private Ryan, you have heard it. The myth goes like this. The ping told the enemy that the American soldier's rifle was empty, so enemy troops would listen for that sound, and the moment they heard it, they would rush forward to attack during the few seconds it took to reload. Soldiers were supposedly killed because the ping gave away the fact that they were vulnerable. It makes for a great story. The problem is that there is almost no real evidence it ever actually happened. Battlefields are chaotic and deafeningly loud. Rifles firing, machine guns chattering, artillery exploding, men shouting. The idea that a German or Japanese soldier could hear a small metallic ping from dozens or hundreds of yards away amid all of that noise and then process that information quickly enough to mount a charge before the American reloaded is extremely unlikely. A trained soldier could slam a fresh clip into the M1 in about 2 seconds. Weapons experts and historians have largely debunked the ping myth as a real tactical liability. And here is the part that makes it even better. Some American soldiers actually used the ping to their advantage. They would take an empty en-bloc clip and throw it against a rock or their steel helmet to produce the ping sound on purpose. The enemy, hearing what they thought was an empty rifle, would pop up from cover to rush forward, and the American soldier, whose rifle was still fully loaded, would be waiting for exactly that moment. It was not a widespread official tactic, and the army never trained soldiers to do it, but the stories from veterans are consistent enough across enough different accounts that it clearly happened in the field. Soldiers are resourceful people. They will turn any quirk of their equipment into a weapon if they can. There is also a practical reality that the myth ignores. American soldiers almost never fought alone. Even if one man's rifle pinged empty, the 7 or 8 other soldiers in his squad were still loaded and ready to fire. Any enemy who tried to rush a single soldier during a reload was going to get shot by somebody else. The squad is the fighting unit, not the individual, and the M1's fast reload time of roughly 2 seconds made the window of vulnerability so small as to be almost meaningless. Even the soldiers themselves did not seem to view the ping as a real problem. A 1952 technical memorandum from the Operations Research Office at Johns Hopkins University, which surveyed American troops fighting in the Korean War about their weapons and equipment, found that riflemen actually considered the noise useful. It served as an audible signal that their own rifle was empty and it was time to reload. In the heat of combat, when you are running on adrenaline and might lose count of your shots, that little ping was a welcome reminder. Several soldiers in the survey said they valued it. The M1 Garand was not a perfect weapon. It weighed about 9.5 pounds unloaded, stretched 43 inches from buttstock to muzzle, and with its walnut stock and blued steel barrel, it was not exactly compact. That is a lot of weight to carry across miles of rough terrain day after day, and soldiers felt every ounce on long marches. The en-bloc clip held only 8 rounds, and you could not easily top off the magazine with individual rounds mid-clip. If you had 3 rounds left and wanted to reload to full capacity, you had to eject the partially loaded clip and insert a fresh one. And then there was a hazard that every Garand user learned about the hard way, a painful condition known as Garand thumb. If you were not careful when loading a new clip, the bolt could snap forward onto your thumb with enough force to draw blood and leave a bruise that lasted for weeks. It was practically a rite of passage for new soldiers. But none of these drawbacks came close to outweighing the advantage of semi-automatic fire. The M1 was the standard by which every subsequent American infantry rifle was measured. When the Army went looking for a replacement in the 1950s, the winning design, the M14, was built directly on the foundation of John Garand's operating system. He had created the template, And then came Korea. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, the M1 Garand was pulled right back into frontline service. Many of the rifles issued to troops were the same ones that had been carried through Europe and the Pacific just 5 years earlier, repaired and rebuilt at government arsenals for a new war. American soldiers and Marines carried the Garand through the desperate defense of the Pusan perimeter, up through the frozen nightmare of the Chosin Reservoir, and across the ridgelines of the Korean Peninsula, where Chinese and North Korean forces often attacked in massed human wave assaults that resembled the banzai charges of the Pacific War. Once again, the semi-automatic advantage proved decisive. The rifle held up in conditions that would have destroyed lesser weapons. In the brutal cold of Korean winters, where temperatures dropped to 30 or even 40 below zero, the Garand kept working when other equipment seized up and refused to function. Soldiers applied heavy grease to the operating rod and bolt, and the rifle cycled through it all. Production lines fired back up to meet demand. Springfield Armory ramped output again, and new contracts went to International Harvester, the tractor company, and Harrington and Richardson, who together produced over 300,000 additional M1 rifles between 1953 and 1956. The M1 saw action far beyond American hands too. It served in the Indochina War, the Vietnam War, the Six-Day War, the Iran-Iraq War, and even the Syrian Civil War. Decades after its adoption, the rifle kept showing up on battlefields around the world because it was simple, accurate, and reliable. Up to this point, this has been a story about a weapon. But there is a detail about the man who created it that changes the entire texture of what you have just heard. John Garand never received a single cent in royalties for the M1 rifle, not 1 penny. Over 6 million rifles were manufactured. They armed the largest military force the world had ever seen. They helped win the deadliest war in human history. And the man who designed them, who spent 17 years perfecting the mechanism, who personally developed new manufacturing tools and machines to make production more efficient, who offered every one of his patents to the United States government royalty-free, received nothing beyond his regular government paycheck. He was a civil service employee. That was the deal he accepted when he walked through the gates of Springfield Armory in 1919. Everything he invented while working there belonged to the United States government. He transferred all rights to his inventions in January of 1936, the same month the rifle was officially adopted. And Garand apparently never complained about it. Not publicly, at least. He was described by people who knew him as quiet, modest, and shy. The kind of person who would rather spend 14 hours at his workbench than 5 minutes giving an interview. A newspaper profile from 1941 called him a man of average build and average appearance, with wavy dark hair and the high cheekbones of a Downeaster who still spoke with a French-Canadian accent after 40 years in New England. He was, by all accounts, the exact opposite of the weapon he created. The rifle was loud and aggressive. The man was quiet and understated. Congress did try to do something about it, eventually. A bill was introduced to award John Garand $100,000, which, in 1941 money, would have been worth roughly $2.2 million today. The bill did not pass. Garand was given a Medal for Meritorious Service in 1941 and a Medal of Merit in 1944, but no money. He continued working at Springfield Armory until he retired in 1953. At his retirement ceremony, on April 30th of that year, at the Kimball Hotel in Springfield, the Army presented Garand with a special gift. It was an M1 Garand rifle, serial number 1 million, the milestone rifle that had rolled off the production line in November of 1942. It came in an inscribed walnut display case with a plaque authorized by the Secretary of the Army. The en bloc clip inside was silver-plated, and the 8 dummy cartridges were gold-plated, each one engraved with the name of a colleague. It was a beautiful gesture, but it was still just a gesture. A woman named Dorothy Jerome from Helena, Montana, read about Garand's situation and was so moved that she mailed him a personal check for $1 along with a letter expressing her wish to contribute to what she called his share of what was due. Garand never cashed the check. He spent the rest of his years in Springfield with his wife Nellie and their family, a quiet retirement for a man whose invention had changed the course of the 20th century. He did not write a memoir. He did not go on lecture tours. He did not open a consulting firm. He just lived. John Garand died on February 16, 1974, at the age of 86. The year after his death, the Army inducted him into the United States Army Ordnance Corps Hall of Fame. The citation acknowledged his inventive genius and his remarkable mechanical skill, and stated plainly that because of his initiative and singular determination, the American soldier possessed a firepower advantage during World War II. Today, the M1 Garand remains one of the most collected and celebrated firearms in the world. The civilian marksmanship program still sells surplus M1 Garands to qualified buyers. Military honor guards and drill teams still carry them in ceremonies across the country. The rifle shows up in museums from the Smithsonian to the Springfield Armory National Historic Site. And that ping, the sharp metallic sound of the empty clip ejecting, is still one of the most instantly recognizable sounds in military history, echoing through video games, movies, and documentaries more than 80 years after the rifle first went to war. The M1 Garand did not just give American soldiers a better rifle, it gave them a fundamentally different kind of fight. While every other major army in World War II sent its infantry into battle with weapons that required a manual action between each shot, American troops could keep their eyes on the target, keep their hands on the rifle, and keep firing. That advantage, multiplied across millions of soldiers on battlefields spanning 2 oceans and 3 continents, helped tilt the balance of the entire war, and the man who made it all possible asked for nothing in return. He built a weapon that changed the trajectory of the 20th century, handed the designs over to his country without a single condition, and went back to his workbench to keep working on the next improvement. The rifle outlived its creator by decades and will likely outlive everyone watching this video. It was built in a time when weapons were made from steel and walnut, not polymer and aluminum. 8 rounds in a stamped metal clip, 1 unforgettable ping when the last round was spent. That is the legacy of the M1 Garand. If this story hit you the way it hit us, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us which military weapon you think deserves its own documentary.